Hi, David. How are you?
Hey Dina, I'm doing good. Just as good and just as bad as everyone else.
So for those that don't know, I'm here with David Banks, who's the kind of mastermind behind the Rail Marathon. And for anyone who doesn't know you or your work, can you introduce yourself shortly and what you're about?
I'm a Glasgow-based artist. What that mainly includes is performance, parkour, and design. Even more specifically, the space between those different areas.
Can you talk through what you thought would be happening on the 21st of April this year and what ended up going on?
So the original plan was for me to do the marathon and set a Guinness World Record and use all that buzz and energy to raise money for Freer Instinct and Selena Parkour, also known as Soul Parkour, which is part of Parkour One. And I got injured, so I had a patella dislocation. And then I got back into training, postponed the marathon. I was doing a reverse vault over a rail. And it happened again, this time tearing a tendon, which sucks. So obviously things got derailed and it turned into something a little bit different.
Derailed, eh? So you said the marathon there. Can you explain what the marathon actually was?
The idea was to get a set piece of railing. I was going to do, it was something stupid like 1,200 lengths until I accumulated the distance of a marathon. But it turned into something a little bit different. A few of us put our heads together, a few kind of people that had been there from the start supporting it. And we put our heads together, so we were going to decide whether to postpone it again. For me to do a normal amount on like a low rail with crutches, so do like a mile myself with crutches, or open it up to the wider community. So I'm really glad we went for that option. I think any time that you do a project that involves a load of participants, it's really scary to put that sort of thing out there. As soon as I said, okay, we'll do a mile each and we need 25 people. What happens if you get two? But fortunately, amongst that core group, we all had like one or two people each that we knew would get involved. And it kind of just got momentum from that to the point that we just didn't say no to anyone. And we done 34 miles, which for anyone that's been to like a parkour event or like even like a Hell Night, we all know that 10 push-ups isn't 10 push-ups in parkour. It's more like 13 with like 2 pause push-ups and then one for the team at the end. It kind of like thematically worked.
And you had folk from all over the world doing it, which is really cool.
Yeah, we had 13 different countries.
From what you had envisaged originally, you doing 26 miles all yourself to 34 people, did you say? Doing a mile is quite different. What has been your favourite part of the changes from what you originally envisioned to what turned up, and what was maybe hardest?
The best thing about it is we've kind of created like a mini tribe. Our little Facebook group is pretty lively. We've had chats back and forth. One of the participants, Georgi, me and him have been joking about how we're going to do climb-ups to space. I haven't traveled so much for training in recent years, and that was one of the feelings I kind of got from it. It also communicated how universally accessible the challenge and the image is. So Tim Pierce from Ukemi, for example, was like, I can only find a flat rail due to social distancing, so I'm going to do the whole thing with my hands behind my back. And then we had some people that were maybe not quite as experienced with parkour that were doing small checkpoints but had never even thought about balancing for a mile. The hardest thing is negotiating footage from 34 people as fast as possible. One of the guys from Mumbai Parkour, he was just like, I literally can't go outside anymore. This is a little secret in on the video. Every video clip is legit from the marathon, except his is from his like 2011 edit. So we made it happen. On a personal level, it's a difficult change to stomach, kind of like building yourself up for that. And I guess that kind of segues quite nicely, like why I do this, why I've done this sort of thing in the past. I get huge benefits from it as well, mentally, physically, spiritually. We're going to go there, you know? So I'm disappointed I don't have that moment and that experience. But I do plan on doing it later this year. I'm just not going to make an event about it.
Did you think, like, did you want to do the marathon to start with? Did you come out of that and think this is a challenge I want to do and it would be a good opportunity to raise money, I guess? Or were you like, I'm keen to do another sort of fundraising thing. What would be a challenge that would bring people together or encourage them to donate?
This answer will veer into poetic territory, but it starts a little bit more Scottish. When I done the cat crawl, I was steaming in halls of residence, like just moved to Glasgow, I think it's 18, 19 maybe, and people were speaking about the Haiti earthquake. I was like, oh, that's shit, people should do something about it. And then someone was like, well, you should do something about it then. And I was like, right, okay. And then I told a few people, still a bit drunk, that I was going to do it, see if they'd help me the next weekend. And then I woke up the next day and I was like, what have I done? Oh my God. So initially I planned to do a half marathon quadruped, and I chose that because I didn't think it could be done. I didn't think I could do it, and I couldn't do it in the end. When I actually finished the quadruped, the 8 miles, I'd like my toes had dislocated, I'd done damage to my shoulders, I'd like done micro fractures in like my wrists, and I was on the toilet, and I came out, and I've never actually told anyone this story, but it was just my dad in the toilet, and I cried. I was just like, I can't do it anymore. I couldn't wipe my ass properly. And I was like, this is bad. And I don't think that I suffer from depression. However, like I was very low for a long time after that. Like I received immediately no joy from that. What had happened was I was doing Lemps. For people that don't know, we raised a crazy amount of money on the day. It was like a 1 day thing. We raised like £4,000. But what would happen is after the day went on, because people were counting live, people were like, right, okay, it's £200 every time you do like a couple of Lemps. And I'd set that distance. So I started visualizing as I was crawling, like people crawling out of rubble up ahead of me. So I just kept on crawling towards that image. So when I did stop, all I could think about was that like one extra family that I could have helped. A few years passed and I wanted to put that to bed. I was like, I need to do another event with a finished distance. And that's when the London Marathon came up. So initially I was raising money for my grandmother who was dying of cancer. She had quite an abusive childhood and requested that we changed it to NSPCC, which is what we've done. Yeah, Rue and I done the marathon, and training for that marathon was a nightmare because of Scottish weather.
Crucially, you've not mentioned that you did the marathon on stilts.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's crazy as well, if you look at the original marathon page, when we first posted it, there's a picture of me standing on the stilt holding onto the lamppost because I was shiting it. I was like, I can't walk in these. But not to say we weren't physically prepared. We were very physically prepared for that. And yeah, we'd done the marathon, kilts on stilts. So a few years passed and I started generating the idea to potentially balance across the channel to France. And so like, I was like, do I stand on a boat? How can I do it? Do I get the channel tunnel to collaborate? And it became unrealistic. So fast forward last year, I'm in the Art of Retreat. I meet like Ben from Parkour One, Madeleine Cussell does her talk about Selena Parkour. So Madeleine is experienced and she's been in a psychiatric ward herself and now she works in one. And she did a presentation and she says she's trying to generate money to test these ideas. And I was like, I got an idea, a balance on a rail. And with the previous ones, this kind of links to my theatre practice. I've always seen them as quite performative in terms of an image. So initially we set out by putting in some arts applications and I was planning on doing the attempt in a museum. Like the idea of balancing a rail and putting one leg in front of the other and getting up, and that has clear like kind of symbolic relations to people struggling with mental health. So meeting Madeleine, some experiences in my own life, so I was like, this is the one. I imagine everyone listening to this right now has experienced someone that's either taken their life or attempted to take their life. So someone close to me done that. The combination of meeting Madeleine and doing that was like, I can do a rail marathon. And the reason I've said those things is simply because when you're building up to do like a large endurance event like this, it's all in your head. And I know this is dark, but when I got on that rail, or when I go in the marathon, or when I done like the crawl, the physical version of me would probably want to give up really quick. But if you can build yourself up psychologically, if you're ready to die before you go out there, you will do it. And I think it takes a combination of doing something that helps people, doing something for me that has some sort of display aspect to it, and doing something that you don't think you can do. And when you find a task that is related to those kind of three pillars, you can enter a really cool state. So for me, getting on that rail and doing a marathon and being really present and giving everything to something is definitely something that I missed that I couldn't do. But the large response that we've got, it has turned into something else quite beautiful, something that will be an annual event now.
The fact that you're talking about how it's as much about your challenge and you grappling with it personally as it is about the event, and the kind of fundraising support is almost like a way for you to have that experience, but also do it on behalf of, I guess, people you care about or issues you care about.
Yeah, I don't think I could push myself that far unless I had something like, there has to be something at the end of that journey, like there has to be.
You talked a little bit about like the stress your body was put under physically. Like I remember seeing one of your shows at uni, and like you finished the show by also getting beaten up by who was much more...
I tried not to get beat up, to be fair.
Okay, like it's a good effort, but you'd asked someone in who wasn't going to give you an easy ride, and you wanted it to be a way and stuff. And you've answered a little bit about like what motivates you to attempt these challenges and what motivates you to complete them. But can you pick up anything that's explained where they come from in the first place?
I think with things like the combat sports in particular, a lot of that came from, I never felt fully safe, maybe particularly in like the area that I grew up in. And also not being a particularly like violent person outside of sports. And it all comes back to the parkour practice of being strong to be useful. Like, I'm not going to go into saying what parkour is. We're very blessed that it doesn't exist with a solitary meaning. It's about knowing something about yourself. I think with a lot of people that do maybe quite extreme things, these extreme highs also come with extreme lows as well. Kind of bring forward to where we are today, where I'm a lot more interested in kind of like, I guess, like the performance aspects of it. I've always been really into durational performance art. So the audience kind of understand what that is. It's like looking at a painting, but it's got performers in it, and you might go in and they'll establish a couple of paintings for you. And they'll hold that painting for a long ass time. I've always been fascinated with that. A more relevant example might be like David Blaine standing in the ice cube or standing on the player in Vertigo, who's like a huge inspiration of mine. But it just feels like you might as well raise some money while you're doing those things. And so I'd say that's more like the kind of the theory behind it. I think physically why I do those sort of things. For me, endurance has always been like a relatively like easy thing. So Chris Grant, when he was training for a marathon, Sticky was running from Land's End to John O'Groats. I'm relatively new to the parkour scene, and Chris was like, do you want to come like run into Glasgow with me? And it was this big thing, everyone's involved, and Chris was like, do you want to do the longer run? And I'm like, no problem. And he kind of like bammed me up, and we're getting the train out to meet Sticky, and there's no trains in Aberdeen. Well, there is trains, but no one gets them, so I have no context for like how much distance is passing. I'm still pretty new in Glasgow at this point, and I just remember looking out the window and noticing how fast the train was going. It's just like, it's gonna be bad. And we were running into like the city centre, and I turned to Chris and was just like, man, I can't do this anymore. I think I'm done. And then he was like, you've only got like 3 miles to go. It's like, I'm not running 3 miles, man. And he was just like, you've ran 18 miles. And I was like, oh, no way. And then I ran into town. So I guess there's the kind of like the theory and like the autobiographical that kind of goes behind why I can do these things. But I do think that I'm also got like decent like fundamental endurance. I think that I'm wired for it.
When you mentioned Sticky there, I was going to ask, because timing wise, that happened before any of your other big fundraising efforts, right?
I think so, yeah.
John goes to Paris in the end, is it not?
Yeah, that's nothing. He was going to run a marathon a day. I recall that he ran 50 miles on the first day just to make the rest of them seem easy. And he'd done parkour in every city that he arrived at.
You can actually maybe trace that in some of the stuff that you've done since, like seeing that early on.
Yeah, totally. There's lots of these, there's so many great athletes and performers out there that do all these kind of like mind-boggling things. So I think that your primary context is always yourself. As much as I could speak about how I've done those things, I still look to like Sticky, David Blaine, all these people, that have done these things. And I think that as a message out to everyone out there, think of a challenge, think of someone maybe one step ahead of you and what they could achieve, and think about the person the next step ahead of them and try it. It doesn't matter if you can complete the distance or not. Like we said earlier, I never successfully done the catcall, but it's a hard thing to explain unless you've been there. But there's a really interesting thing the brain does. So we've all got someone that we can get inspired by. There's always a next step, isn't there? There's always a next step.
You talked a little bit about being an artist and how that links in. All these challenges have combined elements of not just parkour, but for you, a performance thing. Could you talk a bit about the links between your art and your parkour? What links them? What potentially separates them?
Yeah, I think that a lot of that has emerged from necessity initially. When I first started working full-time as a freelancer, a lot of my work came from, because I would do theatre jobs because I was the parkour guy, and I'd do parkour jobs because I was the theatre guy. That's probably like on a financial point in terms of like paying rent and things like that. A lot of that began to emerge and strengthen from that. And I feel like the parkour is a daily practice that I have. I think one of the main differences between, if we call parkour a sport, God forbid for a second, versus say like a more traditional performance practice, is a lot of people in theatre, we don't go out 3-4 times a week and train theatre. And I've kind of like inherently found the space in between by just kind of practicing that regularly and keeping up with my theatre practice and beginning to find the connections. I think that why I've been pushing a lot of parkour work recently is that I've been in a lot of street theatre as the parkour specialist. Almost every time or every show I see in that context, they're saying, oh, we want some parkour people and we're doing a show about breaking free from the 9 to 5. And I'm like, how did you get funded? They'll use parkour practice in their choreographies. They'll want a big street set. So rather than finding a parkour spot, they'll spend all their money on building a set. As everyone knows, one of the inherent problems in the arts as a performer is these are the same people that are trying to game you out your wages. So when I look at a £10,000 set for yet another performance about breaking free from the 9 to 5, and either myself or my friends have had a hard time even getting a fee out of them, it's clear to occupy that space for me. So I went and worked as a professional dancer, I worked professionally in the circus, and I worked in these different areas to kind of gain the experience I needed to have a cast or be able to put on performances and productions around that. So that would be the connection. In terms of a more academic connection, there was a group called the Situationists. And what the Situationists would do was it was a performance art movement that founded like the absurd reality of the everyday. So they would do something called the derive or drift, where they'd maybe walk through a city and they'd hold up a pen and everyone would stand and watch whatever they'd stopped to watch for 5 minutes to see the performative nature in people and the everyday. So I feel that these performance artists in Paris, around that region at the time, created a fertile ground for parkour to exist in the first place. So this idea of the derive or drift, or doing something in a city that is non-normative, that is engaging with kind of architecture in the action that invites rather than what you've been told to do, I would argue is inherently performative. And I think that the parkour community has links all the way back to those early performance art movements in the 60s. My final point on the matter would be, when you're hired as a parkour person to perform, you're not treated like a dancer, I can tell you that. You're not treated like an actor. You're this person that's doing this cool thing, and they're probably going to want you just to do a backflip anyway. So if we look at all the art forms that have emerged from the street, so to say, like breakdance and hip hop, it took a long time before that was kind of seen as a sovereign art form in its own sense. There is no parkour show about parkour. Parkour is glitter in a performance. Parkour is nothing else. So I think there's something inherently missing because of that.
I think that's really interesting, and particularly when you think about it in the context of the challenges that you've done, not looking at all like the kind of parkour that the director would ask you to do at the end of a show, you know, like
not at all. And yeah, and then I think that like that's the kind of extreme performance art end that I do with the work. So like Nina, she was in a residency for a show that I'm developing called Traceur, which is a parkour show about traceurs for traceurs. One of her parts in the show was we drew the audience faces on helium balloons, and we set ourselves up around the parkour spot. And we called out Nina saying, like, you know, you think you're a hero, you think you're useful, you have 10 seconds, and we'd introduce the person that we'd drawn, and Nina would have X amount of time to get across the space and capture it. So yeah, it's kind of like I guess it's two different audiences. It's two completely different audiences. The kind of performance art spectrum into the more kind of like theatre kind of territory. I think they require different pieces of work. When you're working as an artist, you have to strike the balance between what you think you can get people to put money on the table for, because regardless of what people think, like there's a business side to this. There's the side of it that pays your rent and keeps you alive. And there's obviously the projects that I would ideally like to do. And they certainly are interlinked. So a lot of it's about carefully choosing your pathway. So you could say the same with the rail marathon. I wanted to do a performance art image about mental health, maybe crossing the channel. I wanted to do this big event. Okay, someone needs to raise some money. Okay, it's a parkour context. Okay, this is where I'm doing it. Okay, a museum won't take me. What does it become? The output isn't necessarily what you set out to do, but you have to engage in that journey a lot of times before that output is what you want it to be.
I wonder if you can bring that a little bit more and talk specifically about Soul Parkour and Freedom Instincts and kind of why they were the organisations you wanted to support in this.
Yeah, it connected to like the image I was trying to create. I really liked the work they were doing. I'll speak about a bit more about that in a moment. I like the people involved in terms of what they do. So the members of both have experience and also work in hospital psychiatric units and various services with people that are in mental health crisis as it is. They also just happen to be parkour coaches. So what they're doing is they're tailoring sessions for those people, which I think is a really exciting kind of form of therapy, that they're doing such a thing. And I guess that pushes parkour into yet another area, which is really cool. People listening at home, take parkour, choose one random thing that excites you in your life, get a big piece of paper, write parkour on one end and that thing on the other end. What's the single slightest change you can make that makes parkour a little bit more like that? And then do it from the other end as well. And along that chain, you're going to find kind of rich territory and plenty of ideas to work on.
And one of the places I think that we've started to see parkour's links with other areas more clearly is in events like the Art of Retreat, which obviously the European version did not happen this year in quite the same way, but you chatted about it was last year, was where you came across Free Instincts and Soul Parkour, who you eventually ended up raising money for. That international element was baked in from the start. So even when it was just going to be you doing all the miles on the rail marathon yourself, you were always going to be raising money for organisations that were actually a little bit further afield. I wanted to check if that was something that was deliberate and how important that element was to you.
I was quite aware that they were in different countries and that they weren't necessarily going to benefit anything in Scotland. But outside a couple of groups, on Parkour Outreach being one, there's very few things in that theme that I could have supported in Scotland at the moment. I think it would have been more about raising money for somewhere like Access Parkour, a parkour syllabus to do a specific workshop with people in mental health crisis. I went for those other charities because they already had proof of concept and they could deliver work off the back of that donations that was just simply based around how far along they are comparatively to other groups doing similar things in Scotland.
That makes sense. But I guess in the end, it turned into a proper global effort and was more international.
Yeah.
You would have imagined. Would you say you're pleased about that fact?
Oh, definitely. For everyone kind of out there as well, check out #railmarathon on Instagram and you'll find out what a lot of people have also been doing in their own time. There's been various blogs. The decision's already been made that we're going to repeat this next year, which is really exciting. This has become an international thing on a very short notice, a couple of weeks. So next year we have all this evidence. We've got a big group cohort of people that are saying they're going to do it next year. Let me know your thoughts, everyone. Should we do 100 miles next year? Or should we try and climb to space? It's something stupid, 15,000 2-meter climb ups. I think it's way more than that. I think why these images work really well for raising money, it reduces that that point of connection to what you're raising money for. Often we're raising money because people are suffering. That's the bottom line, why a lot of people raise money. By doing these long, arduous events, people have a face to put to that. Not to mean that you can't make it joyful. The rail marathons turned into quite a joyful thing, but everyone did have their individual challenges with it. And their connection and their group of people who know them, it isn't just this random person, they have a face to connect it to. I think that's a difficult thing when we were chatting earlier about these people in the world that are doing crazy things running 100 miles at once. There's always going to be these exceptional people out there that can just do these things. Whereas what's been exciting about this is we've got lots of people that might not necessarily have done something like this before getting involved. It puts a face to the charity, it puts a face to the suffering, it creates a joyful connection. We ultimately raise more money. Everyone listening, I'd love you to get involved next year. And the reason why it's important that you get involved is because only you can engage the circle around you. No one else can do that.
So the fundraiser itself for this rail marathon, I think it's going to be the other one, it's going to be live for a little bit longer, right?
Yeah, so it's going to be live in probably till the end of the month. Essentially, as things dry out, if we don't get a donation for a couple of weeks, we'll close the page there. We have hit our funding target of £2,000, but it's just an arbitrary number. Whatever we raise will get used for those charities. So don't think because we're already at the funding target that money's going to get thrown down the drain. And if you can't donate, this is a pressing time financially for everyone. Share the event. There's benefits no matter how small or large your reach is. It's basically Avon, isn't it?
In all seriousness, thanks so much for making time to chat. We'll leave it there, I think, and encourage everyone to still donate if you can, share the event if you can, and if you can't do either of those things, then you can look out for more rail marathon news, I guess, in about a year.